The latest adaptation of the book Dune, this time directed by director Denis Villeneuve, is out. We've seen it and we're going to talk about it. I'm Bryan Schink,
I'm Hunter Farris.
and this is Film Talk. All right, welcome back to the channel, Hunter. How are you doing? How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I've had a little progress on the found footage Dracula movie. I got to watch some of it. I know the show's been out for a while. My roommate just barely started watching it.
Nice.
But yeah, otherwise things are just plain good.
Well, that's awesome to hear. Um, we've both seen Dune. First off, have you read the book at all?
So I am coming to this relatively blind. I have no framework for comparative analysis here. I can't talk about this film through the lens of the book or the 1984 adaptation by David Lynch because I just haven't experienced any of that. But that does give me the perspective of a complete noob who's just like, I don't know if I should watch it because I don't know if it's going to make sense. It seems really intimidating. It's a really long book. It gives me a good perspective of being able to say to that fan how it might feel.
Gotcha. And I am on the other side of the aisle. I came into this reading the book, listening to the book read to me via Audible while I was working. So I have the foreknowledge of what the book said. So I'll be able to bring that aspect of it to the table to see what is different from the book, and what might have been better, what might be worse in my opinion from the book. But I also haven't seen the 1984 film, and I don't plan on it because it looks um, uh, unique, I guess I can say, especially in
Dude, just say
comparison
it's
to
by
this
David
movie.
Lynch and
I mean, I'm not gonna say it looks bad. I think it does,
oh,
but
I'm
it's
not
unique
saying
in
that it
that
looks
way.
bad.
Right,
I'm
right.
just
That's why
like,
I'm saying
yeah,
it looks
it's David
unique.
Lynch. What did you expect?
Right. All right. So let's get into talking about this. Let's first start off with a spoiler warning for anybody watching. If you have not seen the new Dune movie 2021, go and watch it. I highly recommend that you do. You do not want this spoiled for you. So there's your spoiler warning. Go out and see it. Let's start off. Let's talk about the runtime, because I know we were about to talk about that before we started recording. I want to know what your opinion on the runtime is. What do you think? What do you think about it?
Okay, so I can certainly joke about the runtime. Like, sure, it's 2.5 hours long. Sure, if that makes it feel more like a blockbuster event movie, like the impression that this is going to be big and action and sci-fi, and it's not trying to be. In the hands of any other director, this movie would be half an hour shorter.
Right.
Maybe a full hour shorter. If it's like Sam Raimi directing this would have been 90 minutes. And that's why Denis Villeneuve is the right person to direct this.
Right.
Because Denis Villeneuve's directing style is very slow and contemplative, and in the process, he's able to make the movie feel massive, epic. Because a lot of the filler, a lot of the padding of the runtime is just what was the phrase? Is just characters walking to their marks with
Right.
no sound except the echo of their feet, which is exactly how it should feel if you want to make it feel massive. That way, the room can feel big, empty, and these people can feel very, very important. So, I think the runtime was the right amount for this particular adaptation of Dune. I also think that if they'd gone with a different director, they could have adapted the entire book into one movie. They
Right.
just chose not to.
And I definitely agree with not adapting the entire book into one movie. I would much rather see multiple longer movies than one short movie that condenses the entirety. Because I've read the book, it is insane how much is packed into the book, and a lot. I'm surprised how much they took out of the book. It still feels like Dune. Like there are, I think 50% of the book, at least up to this point, was taken out because a lot of it was just people sitting around and talking. There was an entire dinner scene with a still suit manufacturer that was completely taken out of the film. I honestly would have liked to see it adapted. However, it adds to the like it makes it a lot less boring, I guess, when you take out some of the more basic stuff, like characters sitting in a room and talking, and they put it in as like either a quick nod or something a lot smaller. Because the dinner scene took up, it was like an entire chapter in the book, was this one dinner scene, which I get why they took it out. I do think personally on the runtime, it should have, this story should have ended with the fall of the city, or the, what's his name, uh, the Baron getting the poison blown in his face. Oh, sort of around there. I felt like once we hit that area in the film, I personally felt that the film was almost over. And then I looked at how long it was until the film was over and realized we still had an hour. So personally, I would have broken the book up even more from there and put all of that stuff after into another movie, because that battle, like the fall of the city, felt more like a conclusion than the conclusion we actually got. But I guess that's why you have this director directing the film and not me, because I hear a lot of people love the ending, and I'm okay with it. I just think it should have been split up a little bit more, if you know what I mean.
So on that topic, Denis Villeneuve knew exactly what movie he was adapting.
Right.
He knew that he was not trying to adapt the entirety of Dune, because that's not a great idea. Dune. So a lot of people say that Dune is a really good book, and I assume that's because it takes advantage of the medium of book. If you're going to adapt it to the medium of film, you have to change some things and take out some things in order to take advantage of the strengths of the medium of film. So the reason why I bring that up is that Denis Villeneuve knew he could tell one story. That was all he got time to tell. And so he chose the story of a psychic son of a chief who moves to a new planet. Psychic son of a duke who moves to a new planet only to discover that he may or may not be the messiah of the people he's about to rule over.
Right.
Like, that's the story he chose to tell, and he cut out basically everything else, which really, I was very refreshed at that. Like,
Right.
I was genuinely impressed at that, because I'd heard a lot about how impenetrably long and intimidatingly difficult Dune is to read, and I'm like, oh, he actually made it very straightforward.
Right. Right. Um, and as someone who's read the book, it is a 24-hour audiobook. It is probably the longest audiobook I think I have in my library right now. Most of them are between 15 and 16 hours. This one is 24. And that is the entire entire book, which is intimidating to read, which is why I got it on an audiobook and not as like a physical copy. But at the same time, a lot of the charm of the book comes from the way that it's written and some of the dialogue moments. And personally, for me, not all of that was translated to the screen. Let's talk about not what's his name, um Yue,
Duncan,
Doctor
Idaho.
Yue, not Duncan
Oh,
Idaho.
okay.
Yue's betrayal in the book is set up from the minute that you see Yue. In the film, at least for me, it came out of nowhere. Like, I was trying to put myself in the shoes of a regular watcher, and I it just didn't feel right in comparison to where the book you knew Yue was the traitor from the moment that he stepped into the book, and you were just waiting for them to reveal it, and it was very refreshing. Um, but
I think that I think okay. I can't really remember much foreshadowing to the idea that Yue is the traitor. It felt like a plot beat, not like a reveal that was supposed to
right,
add more light onto a previous situation. But I do think that it fit very well with the tone that Denis Villeneuve is going for. I mean, it felt to me like he was going for like he was going for epic political intrigue, kind of the feeling of like a Game of Thrones in space kind of idea.
okay,
And having this, having it set up that there is a traitor, we don't know who, and it could be someone from outside, but it could be someone from inside, and then getting the answer, it's the Doctor. really fits that tone of political intrigue and betrayal.
Okay. And that definitely makes sense. Again, I'm coming from somebody who knew about the betrayal going into this, and I was comparing it to the book. And like personally, I don't think it worked as a betrayal. It definitely works more of a hey, there's somebody in our ranks who is, uh, who is not loyal to us, and then it's revealed. But personally, I think it would have worked better if there was even just a little bit of foreshadowing to Paul and to Jessica, like it was in the book. But it's not a perfect one-to-one adaptation of the book. That is almost impossible to do with just how much was in the book. So, and I get it. And that's one of the things that I have a problem with. One of the few things, mind you, with this film that I have a problem with is just how they handled that betrayal, in my opinion. But
And
honestly,
that's honestly completely fair. Like, I think it would have been really fun to know that Yue was the traitor from the beginning and feel that political intrigue and build and build and build until it finally explodes literally. I think that could have been really cool to watch on screen.
right. And it was really cool in the book because, like, while you're reading, you see Yue interacting with Paul and with Jessica, and he's talking to them like a friend, but you know in the back of your mind that he does not have their best interest at heart. And it's like, it twists at you from inside until the reveal finally comes, and you get the satisfaction of discovering that what you knew finally came to pass, and the horror of that realization at the same time hitting you like a brick wall. It was honestly like a really really good scene in the book, and that can go like a lot towards the narrator because the guy who narrated the book made that scene like a hit. Um,
Yeah, I could absolutely see that. I mean, I love when the narrator takes advantage of the strengths of all books. I love when books take advantage of the strengths of books, and I think this film generally took advantage of the meat of the strength of movie.
oh,
Sorry, of the strength of movies.
right, and definitely like this film. This was the prettiest film I think I've ever seen. Like the entire film is set on a desert planet, so it's very mute. It's very like light yellow. It's very brown. But when you get that night battle, that nighttime scene with the massive like eruptions of blue and deep red, it's awe-inspiring. Cause like you spend the entire time on this dusty planet, and then finally you get those pops of color, and it just lights up the entire theater.
Yeah, on that topic, after a lot of discourse over the past few years about desaturated color palettes and gray palettes, I am so glad to see a movie show how gorgeous an unsaturated color palette can be.
Right. Especially when you match it up with the oversaturation of the explosions that happen during that battle with like the deep reds and the bright blues. Cuz throughout most of the movie we saw like the shield, the way that they visualized the shields in this movie were incredible. And like especially when I was thinking of the shields in the book, this is what I thought of, and it, it blew me away how they were able to make all this stuff actually like feel like I was reading the book.
That's wonderful. Seriously, that is wonderful that you felt like you were reading this book that you love.
Um, and like even like the scale in this film, like I don't think I've seen a film that expressed its scale as well as this film has. Like personally, like not even like Endgame was able to, or any of the MCU films really that had like the Chitauri in him, were really able to like express how big they were. And Dune just hit that mark over and over and over again. Like from the ships to that teleportation ring in space to the sandworms to the harvesters to the desert.
Yeah, I kept comparing the scale to The Return of the King.
Oh, I haven't seen any of the Lord of the Rings movies.
You're missing out. You're gonna love it.
I know.
Um,
I'm
reason
waiting
why
to read the books.
that, that's fair. Reason why I bring up Return of the King is just that like I was comparing it to other movies that have just like really big scales, massive and epic, and I was like, this movie understands how to make something look big in ways that very few other movies do. And I look forward to that video essayist who gives a presentation on how Dune makes things look big, and for other cinematographers, here's how to make your thing look really, really big.
Right. And I've seen a lot of people comparing Dune, the 2021's Dune to the Star Wars of our generation, and I don't think that's a fair comparison because Star Wars was the creation of a genre, whereas Dune is more of an expansion on a genre, just based on a book. And I personally would say that Dune is the Lord of the Rings of our trilogy. Because where Star Wars was the creation of something, Lord of the Rings was a big event based around a genre that already existed, around a book that already existed. And that's what I feel Dune is. Especially being we're going to get multiple, hopefully, we're going to get another a sequel to this film, and then more down the line that like depicts and like takes the other books and puts them on the screen.
Yeah, the best comparison I can think of, just because, like, okay, if you were to ask me what genre Dune is, I would say that that an epic sci-fi that it's an epic sci-fi political intrigue movie. At
Right.
least this part of Dune, and I'm like, yeah, that's Game of Thrones in space.
Oh, exactly.
Like,
Or Lord
ev-
of the Rings in space,
like
even.
I kept warning people, like, don't go in expecting Star Wars. It's
Right.
not Star Wars. It doesn't want to be Star Wars. If you go in expecting gunfight, if you go in expecting laser fights and laser swords and great epic mythic quests with chosen ones, that's not what you're getting here. This isn't about quests. This is about politics, and it does the political tension so well.
Oh, it does. It does political tension really well. Part one especially is like the first half of the book is where you get all the political drama and stuff like that. Then after the fall of the city, after the fall of House Atreides, and after like a majority of what's going to be the beginning of the next film, we will get into that epic battle that we saw in the film. We saw that little snippet of that epic battle between the two forces, the one in the gold armor and the one in the silver armor. We're gonna get to that. It's going to be epic and grandiose. However, we have to get through the setup and the tension building and all of this before we can get there, and that's what makes those epic battles satisfying. Like in a lot of films, if you just had nothing but epic battles and stuff, it'd be a cool watch, but it would have no retaining value. It would have no lasting impact on your head aside from pretty colors and bright lights. There would be no characters, there'd be no uh, speeches, nothing quotable except for maybe a one liner from that really awesome pilot guy that's in every single movie like this. So I'm glad that they're taking their time to build up this world and the characters so we can have those memorable moments before we get to the massive set piece action scenes.
Which I think is a lot of why you were saying that this movie probably should have been cut off at the killing of the Baron, because that's about when the political intrigue ends. After
Right.
that, it becomes, gosh, what would I call it? A survival action movie, a survival adventure movie. Like, it completely shifts genres, which I should point out is a good thing. That's what midpoint climaxes are supposed to do. They are supposed to completely change the playing field, and sometimes that means completely changing the genre.
Exactly. And like so yeah that back to the runtime, I guess that's another issue that I had with the film was that it kept in all the stuff after the fall of House Atreides with the Fremen, which should have been put in the next film as like the opening, the beginning, leading up to another somewhat big set piece battle, and then the third film would be the same way. Um, if they're doing a trilogy, of course. But like just in general, I think a lot. Although I am just coming off of the book and then just watching a lot of superhero movies, I, it makes sense. I'm losing my words here. I'm thinking about this in a way of movies end with a big action scene, and I was thinking that same way in the theater, and I had to remind myself, not every movie has to have a big action scene. We know this film is going to end on a cliffhanger. It was always going to. That's the thing with Dune. It has to. But at the same time, I was trying to think what would be a satisfying way to end the film. And one of the thoughts I had was when Paul and Jessica were standing confronted by the sandworm. If the titles rolled right there, that would have been satisfying. If the title would have rolled as soon as Paul met Zendaya's character, that would have been satisfying. Even where it ended up now, it was somewhat satisfying, but at the same time, it just doesn't feel whole to me. But that's also because it's not the full story.
Yeah, I could see that. I think a lot of people did expect it to have a cliffhanger, and at the same time, there have been sorry, I think a lot of people expected it to feel like a part one.
Right.
And there have been a lot of movies that come out and say we're a part one right at the beginning, and they feel like a complete movie. Avengers: Infinity War, The Two Towers, Back to the Future 2, kind of. I mean, sure, they throw in a cliffhanger, but it's right at the end after the entire story is resolved.
Right.
Like, they could have resolved the entire story here.
Right.
I think they chose not to for a reason. I think they wanted to end this not on the idea of political intrigue, but on the idea of Paul ascending from prince to king,
Right.
just of a different group.
Right. Another time I thought the movie was going to end was when him and Jessica were in the tent and he got the ring. I honestly thought he was going to put the ring on his finger, and as soon as the ring hit the finger, we'd get a music crescendo and the credits would roll. But that's also just my brain saying this would be a satisfying place to end the film, and not giving the film the credit and the time to finish how it needed to and how it was designed to. And I don't know if that soured my thought on the ending of the film, because I thought it was kind of underwhelming, but at the same time, it is a part one. But it's a different kind of part one than Infinity War, as you were saying, which is why they changed it from Infinity War Parts 1 and 2 to then Infinity War and Endgame, because there was a conclusion. It wasn't satisfying, but it was a conclusion. Well, it was satisfying in, a sense.
Yeah, I think by way of satisfying, the question just comes down to did they finish telling the story they were telling? And the real question is, well, what is the story that they're telling then? I think the story is Paul's discovery of his place as the Fremen Messiah.
Right.
And ending it with Paul becoming the leader of the Fremen is kind of the perfect way to resolve that particular story.
Right, right. And that definitely does make sense. It's definitely more of a narrative conclusion than a an art visual conclusion, which is what most films go for, is a visual conclusion rather than a narrative one. Especially when you're talking about part twos, because most part twos there's more narrative to come afterwards. So they don't always end on a narrative conclusion. It's more visual. It's more emotional. It's it's a different kind of conclusion, I guess.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that. Now, these are. I'm just trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out why the film did what it did, and trying to give it the benefit of the doubt and the best possible interpretation that will make me say, "Oh yeah, yeah, I get that. I appreciate what they're trying to do." And that's partly because, and I'm going to be perfectly honest here, I generally don't connect to Denis Villeneuve's directing style. I
Gotcha.
understand what he's trying to do. I respect what he's trying to do. I don't connect with it. Someday I will watch Blade Runner 2049, but I'm in no hurry. Uh,
Right.
and because of that, it stops me from connecting with a lot of Dune. But what I definitely connected to was the political intrigue. They did such a good job of making it feel like every word was a life or death situation where if they just said the wrong word one time, everybody would lose everything. They really made it feel like they were on the edge of total collapse. Great job. I could feel the political tension the entire time. Yes, I'm saying a lot of praise about a movie I didn't connect to because I'm like, hey, I don't want to talk bad about this movie. I want to enjoy this movie and I want to talk about the things that I liked about it, even if I didn't personally connect to the movie as a whole.
Right, right. And on the note of the political intrigue and the words and stuff, why don't we switch gears and talk about the voice and its how it was portrayed in this film? Because I got a lot to say about that first scene of Paul using the voice, and how we saw like his lips. He said the words, and you could hear the echo in the theater of the bass boosted words, and then his voice came screaming in after that, and was that that made my chair shake. The way they did that, it was incredible. I just wish they would have kept that same energy for the other times rather than changing it after the next scene, because it still had that bassy undertone, but it wasn't the bassy undertone then a second later followed by the voice. It was layered on top of one another for when they were in the ship and when they were uh in front of the Harkonnens, which I thought was a missed
Yeah,
opportunity, but you know.
the voice was one of the things that this movie did to take advantage of the medium of film. You can't get that. You can get that effect and that feeling through the medium of book, but you have to do it a different way.
Right.
You could maybe get a medium of audiobook, maybe, but in film, that's something that's like uniquely built to do because you expect you're gonna go watch this in the theater with the best speakers money can buy.
Exactly. And that like I that's why I love the way that they did it for the first time we hear the voice where it's just the echo and then the his words like just burst in. But then when they did it on the helicopter, that is something that I was like kind of disappointed by. It was not a deal breaker. It was still awesome. But I just I don't know. I wish they would have kept the same energy for every time it was used, because it wasn't used all that often. It was used sparingly, just like it was in the book, because it's not something that needs to be used all the time, especially if you're a diplomat.
I completely lost my train of thought, but
Dude, so did
yeah,
I.
the voice was awesome.
It was. And that really leads into the sound design of this film, because everything felt massive in scale and sound. And the way, like, definitely you want to go see this in theaters. I would recommend IMAX. I didn't go. There's no IMAXs in Northeast Ohio anywhere near me, and I wasn't about to drive 3 hours to go watch a 2.5 hour movie. Um, but if you can take,
So I did get to watch it in IMAX.
ooh, and then how did
So
how did it
two
sound for you?
Okay, so yes, the sound design is massive. It's epic. It's awesome. It's exactly what you were talking about. Also, there's a lot of footage that's filmed for IMAX, which makes it feel even bigger than they already feel in a normal theater. There is a but.
Okay,
I don't like the fact that there's a but. I don't like talking about the but. Um, a lot of whispering in Act 2B.
right,
IMAX speakers sacrifice IMAX speakers sacrifice treble for bass.
gotcha. Yeah, I
I
did
think
notice.
Dolby Atmos speakers do not sacrifice treble for bass. I think they give you both treble and bass, I think. And so like when one of my D players was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go see Dune this weekend. Should I watch it on HBO Max? Should I watch it in a theater?" I asked, "Do you have IMAX and Dolby Atmos? If you can watch it with both of those, that is the perfect way to watch it. If you
Right,
can't, get the biggest screen you can, get the best speakers you can, get the best bass you can, but watch it with subtitles if you can't get Dolby Atmos because there's a lot of whispering and you literally cannot hear what they are saying in like Act 2B, so after the fall of House Atreides, but before they find the Fremen.
gotcha. Yeah, I definitely like my theater was a Dolby Atmos theater. Um, I only remember it because they have that stupid all around you thing, and it scares me every freaking time. Um, but it you could definitely hear the whispering in my theater. It was very clear, clearer than I honestly wish it was at times because they ended up getting a lot of that ASMR aspect that I personally don't like about whispering. Um, and it was amplified within the Dolby theater. But definitely, I would say if you could do a mix of Dolby and IMAX, you should definitely do that. Just because just to like to get the massive sounds as well as like the quiet moments. But IMAX specifically for the massive scale of not only the sound but the visuals because my theater it doesn't have an IMAX theater in it and most of like what's filmed on IMAX is filmed specifically to make everything look much bigger and much more like clear and then you put it on a regular screen and it I don't know. But that is to say the scale was still incredible. It was still like the biggest like Godzilla, the American Godzilla movies could not do scale. I thought personally, in the same way that this film did scale, and I don't understand how.
Speaking of which, speaking of which, I really look forward to cinematographers watching this movie and learning from it, using it as a textbook on how to do scale. And I don't say that in a way to say that cinematographers don't know how to do. I haven't seen scale done to this degree, and I cannot wait to see a kaiju movie learn
Right.
from this movie. I cannot wait to see a Godzilla movie that's like, no, 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 this thing massive. I cannot overestimate to you how big Godzilla is in a Godzilla movie. That will be wonderful.
Exactly, and like I don't know why. Like when I was watching Godzilla vs Kong, they would put the monsters up against the cities. You would see them in comparison to the skyscrapers, but at that scale, there is no like comparison that you can make between a building and a kaiju because they look the same. And even if you know that's a building, it doesn't click. At least for me, that kaiju is massive. You have to put it next to something that is of relative size to a human. And even then, they never had the kaijus in full view next to a human outside of sitting down or like you see the human and then the kaiju foot. But you don't get the full image of the kaiju and then the human next to it for that scale factor. And personally, I think the film uh, it loses out on that specific aspect of big thing fight other big thing because after a while it doesn't look big, it looks like two regular sized things fighting in a miniature city. And I feel that's
Which,
one
let's be honest, that's what it was at first.
true that is what it's supposed to be.
Like at the beginning of the genre.
Right, and that's what it's supposed to be. But I think like Dune does it the best of every film I've ever seen. Dune does scale the best. Transformers, the Bayverse, for all its flaws, does scale really well when it comes to Optimus Prime and Bumblebee and Megatron and those big robots. It does scale really well. And then the American Godzilla, the legendary Godzilla movies, eh, sometimes, very few, very small moments they do scale well, but not always, not all the time, and that's what holds those types of films back, especially in comparison to what we saw in theaters this weekend.
Something that I'd like to bring up that I don't think would be on your notes because you already read the book.
Right.
For people who haven't read the book, like one thing that I was like legitimately actually worried about was, am I going to comprehend the plot
Oh,
and am I
right.
going to comprehend the world building? Like, there's just so much. I've heard a lot about how Dune is just this intimidatingly dense book, and there's just so much in Dune, and I'm like, am I even gonna understand what's going on? Yes, yes, I did. I understood everything that was going on except for the parts where I literally could not hear the dialogue,
Right.
and that's just because I'm bad at understanding dialogue. Like, I watch everything with subtitles. If I can, I watch it with subtitles because I don't know what the actors are saying most of the time. That's mostly a me thing. Anyway, moving on.
Right.
I understood everything that was going on. They picked one very clear plot line and stuck to that plot line, and every single bit of world building was very, very clearly established, and they made sure to only include the world building that you actually need to know for this particular film, to the point that, like, they're gonna have to establish new worlding for part two.
Right. Um, and
Because
that
they
is
kind of just, like, ran out of world building. They used all their world building.
exactly, and that's a good thing, I would say, because that means that they made this film for the people who have never seen the book. Because when I like while I was watching this, I was having a hard time understanding the plot because from my experience from reading the book, the plot is so much denser and there's so much more. I was expecting so much more that taking so much out of it threw me for a loop. And so I spent the past couple of days trying to wrap my head around the much neater plot, which is a good thing because that means the film is comprehensible to people who don't have all that extra information rattling around in their heads. It doesn't help the people who've read the books, but that is not the audience they were going for. Because if the people who read the books want to experience Dune, you read the book. This is for people who have not read the book and want to see the story on the big screen, and I think it did a perfect job at that, especially in the very brief thing I want to bring up. The scene with the Hunter Seeker in the book took place while Paul was asleep. Like, he woke up because he heard the Hunter Seeker go into his room. He stood up. Then Mapes came in. He slammed the Hunter Seeker against the wall. It was a very dramatic scene. It was tense. And in the movie, it wasn't as tense. But I think it worked really well in the movie um, to quote unquote, establish the betrayal that happens later.
Also, on the topic of, they made that Hunter Seeker seem freaking huge.
Oh, they
Like, the
did.
Hunter Seeker takes up almost the entire screen for almost its entire time on
Right.
screen. Like, they are very, like, they are very clear about this thing is important. It is tiny.
Exactly.
It feels tiny, but it looks huge. You can still tell that, like, this thing is tiny. This thing's probably like the size of my thumbnail tops,
Right.
but, like, it feels huge and it feels important in the process.
Exactly. Exactly. And that is definitely like that's credit to the filmmakers, especially because they were able to make something so small, so significant in the manner of just how it was shot. Um, and then there, I still can't believe this was in the book. But there was a scene in the book where Jennifer went into that greenhouse that we saw in the Fremen like base camp. Originally, that greenhouse was in the like the what is it the city. It was inside the castle that House Atreides moved into in the beginning of the movie. That was there, and she went in there during one of the during at one point in the book, and she walked over to a leaf and she felt the underside of the leaf, and there was a message written on the leaf for her by somebody from like 30 years prior. Like, I'm sorry. Dune is awesome. That scene was bonkers. And I kind of wish they had put that in the movie because that would have been incredible to just hear the reactions of people seeing that scene of her just touching a leaf and getting a secret message. But it was probably best left out of the film.
On that topic of secret message through signals, there was a lot of sign language in this film.
Oh, there was.
Like, a lot.
And other languages, even. Like, this wasn't just everyone speaks English. No, there were like several languages spoken to distinguish the different houses and the different people. And
Which,
which,
okay, you understand Dune far better than I do.
right.
What do you think is the value of showing those different languages instead of the filmmakers translating all those languages for the audience's convenience?
Well, it definitely, and even in just like in Dune, it's just there's different languages, but we as readers we see them as English because book. It's really kind of hard to write English and then put the translation afterwards if you're trying to write a story because then it's just redundant. But that's where the medium of film comes in because you can have subtitles. And I think like as a film enthusiast, it is good to have those other languages because it makes you as the watcher feel like this world is a world and not just English speaking people speaking English to other people. Which some sci-fi things get around that by having the characters have like auto translating earbuds or something of that nature. But I like when media actually just puts the original language in and has the subtitles on the bottom because it feels genuine. It feels like you're actually like in another world rather than an English man making an English movie for English speaking people. But that's also just me.
That makes that makes sense. So partly for the immersion, something else that came up, something else that I thought of while you were saying that, it adds to the political intrigue of it because a lot of the movie is about tension between different cultures, and to emphasize that, let's not even have these cultures speak the same language. Let's have it feel like they literally don't speak the same language, so that it feels like they have to learn how to communicate in the way that the other communicates.
Exactly. Now, at the same time, every group in this film does speak English in between groups. Like the Harkonnens speak English to House Atreides. The Fremen speak English to House Atreides. House Atreides speaks English to everybody else. But when they're in their groups, aside from the Harkonnens who speak English to each other, they like the Fremen, they speak their language. Yue speaks his language to Paul. Yue and Jessica speak in sign language. It's a lot more like inter-party dialogue rather than extra party dialogue that's speaking in their native tongue rather than in English, which I would have liked to see. Uh, like, let's say Jessica have a translator for a Harkonnen or for somebody who like they say their thing in their language, the translator says it back and forth like that. It might get a little repetitive at that point, but it would definitely make it feel a lot um, more real almost. Not saying it doesn't feel real because it
Yeah,
does.
translate. Yeah, translator would have worked. Um, I think it works better for the theme of political intrigue and the theme of communication to have Jessica talking directly to so and so,
Right.
or Duke, or talking directly to them, because it means I have to learn your language. I can't just rely on somebody who understands.
Exactly. And that is a very it's a thing you have to balance when you're taking two different cultures with two different languages and putting them together in a film. And as a filmmaker, it can be hard because like it or not, as people who love films, we can be very direct and judgmental on a filmmaker. Even for people who just watch films to watch films, there are those people who are hard to please and you have to either skirt the line for them or throw them out entirely to make a film. Sometimes the people that you have to please are the entire fan base, and it doesn't always work. Look at Star Wars.
Yeah, I've had to learn to give filmmakers the benefit of the doubt and say they probably had a good reason for doing that. I'd rather try to figure out what their good reason was rather than try to talk bad about it. I'm sorry, it's just not fun for me to talk bad about movies anymore. I just don't enjoy
Exactly.
that anymore. I did. I don't now.
Right. And it's the same for me. Like I'll still talk bad about movies that I really don't like, but I always try to find the good in anything. The one thing like there's one movie that really find it hard to find good stuff to talk about in the sea of bad that I like bad that I personally see, and that is The Last Jedi, the eighth Star Wars film. When I first saw it, I loved it, but as I've rewatched it and I've thought about the plot is like non-existent. The visuals are stunning. It is the second most beautiful Star Wars film, but you can't have a film without a plot, and I just don't think the plot in that film was good at all. But again, that is like one of the only films that I can't find too much good about the main story. I will say it's beautiful, and that's about it.
Well, I mean, for crying out loud, I came out and straight up said I didn't really enjoy this movie. I didn't really connect with this movie, and just spent the last half hour to an
Right.
hour praising it.
Exactly.
Like, I still have good things to say, and I'd rather focus on those. I don't want to talk. I don't want to talk about what I didn't like. That's not fun to me. I'm getting repetitive.
Exactly.
Anyway,
All right, so let's move on to the cast because the cast for this film was a who's who of action stars of the past 5 years. You had Zendaya, you had Josh Brolin, you had um, you had what's his name? Poe Dameron. What's his name? Good lord. Um, Oscar
Oscar
Isaac.
Isaac.
Thank you. You had Dave Bautista. It's just like it is just people that are big in Hollywood, and usually that doesn't work. Like I have a thing, I have a belief
Do
where
not forget Jason Momoa.
oh, did I not say Jason Momoa? I thought I did.
Jason Momoa is like exclusively known for action at this point, and he
Exactly.
played a character who is there for action and comedy, and that's it in this movie.
Exactly. And like this film, I think took A-list celebrity and put them in a role that they fit in. To a point where like a lot of films nowadays just take A-list celebrities and put them where they don't belong. And that's why I have a rule in my head, I guess. If I'm watching a movie with The Rock in it, I have to try and see the character and not The Rock because Dwayne Johnson is such a big personality that I cannot see anything except The Rock, which is why I liked him in Moana because I didn't know that was him to begin with. And like
So
I
counterpoint to that,
go ahead.
I really like Dwayne Johnson. I want to see that it's Dwayne Johnson because I just plain enjoy seeing Dwayne
Well,
Johnson.
right.
Sorry, I know that's a very popcorn flick mentality. I came here to see Dwayne Johnson and Emily
Right.
Blunt. Let me see Dwayne Johnson and Emily Blunt.
Exactly. And
Sorry,
like
just a counterpoint there.
it's all good. And there are some films where it's like, yeah, I just want to see an actor. But if you're trying to put that actor in a serious role to the point where the audience only sees the character and not the actor, do not cast an A-list.
Oh yeah, that's a very different situation.
Right, like the MCU almost exclusively casts C and D-list character like actors when they start like for new characters. Now they'll have A-listers in the background, but when Chris Hemsworth was hired on, he wasn't the A-lister he is today. He's an A-lister because of Thor. Same with Robert Downey Jr. and even Chris Evans. They weren't these big Hollywood stars. They were stars. Don't get me wrong, but they weren't these massive household names we know of today. They are that now because of their roles in these films. And casting someone like Dwayne Johnson as Black Adam in DC, I can't see Black Adam. Not only that, Black Adam is like I think he's Middle Eastern in the comics, and now he's African. Which, I mean, I guess you're taking some representation away from like, cause his whole thing is Egyptian. His base in the comics is in Egypt, and like, but even then, it's just I don't know. Dwayne Johnson is too big of a personality for me to be able to see as anyone but Dwayne Johnson, and that's kind of what I feared going into this film. And I'm so glad that I was wrong because, like, Jason Momoa is Duncan Idaho. Like, he is his character. Josh Brolin is Gurney. Oscar Isaac is the Duke. Zendaya, I don't know her name. But like they are their characters, I feel. They're not just, hey, this actor is playing a character. No, they are one and the same now. And that is that to be able to do that with A-listers is incredible. And you just
One
couldn't do
thing
it with
that
The
I kind
Rock.
of love about the cast of Dune is that we've got three different types of actors here. We've got action stars, we've got drama stars, and we've got people who do both. So if okay, I want you to pretend that I told you that there's this sci-fi movie coming out that has space travel and it has Oscar Isaac, Dave Bautista, Jason Momoa, and Josh Brolin.
Okay.
You would have very specific expectations. You would be expecting massive fights, laser swords, and energy beams and spaceship battles and dogfights. You would be expecting essentially Star Wars.
Right.
And now I want you to imagine that I gave you the same idea and said that the guy who brought you Arrival and Blade Runner 2049 is making a movie starring Timothy Chalamet, Josh Brolin, Rebecca Ferguson, Zendaya, and I know there was a fifth person who's just very sorry, Stellan Skarsgård. That's who it was. And Stellan Skarsgård. You'd be like, okay, so we're getting like this mystery drama that's very slow paced and contemplative. And it's almost like they had two completely different casts in the
Exactly.
process that give you two completely different sets of expectations.
And that is exactly what you would expect, and I think they pulled off like the mixture of those two perfectly because this film isn't a comedy, but there are jokes in there. There are small jokes that when they hit, they hit. I don't think there was a single joke, even as small as they were, that I didn't get and I didn't laugh at. And like a lot of it was more slapstick, like the thing between Duncan Idaho and Paul, where they're talking to Hank, and he's like, "You getting muscles?" I am. No. And that's the kind of humor that only Jason Momoa can bring to a character, and it's incredible that they mixed a science the genres of science fiction, comedy, action, fantasy, a political drama, political thriller, as well as a little hint of romance in there between Paul and then Zendaya's character, teeny little bit, and then the end with the whole like you're gonna die, but I want you to die with honor. It's like you have no you think very little of his abilities, but that's what makes the film. To me, it's what makes it work.
Yeah, yeah, I think that Denis Villeneuve did a. Okay, I do not know if Denis Villeneuve did a good job at adapting Dune, or at least what Dune is in your head, or the
Right.
listener's head, or somebody else's head. But I do think Denis Villeneuve did a very good job at this particular adaptation of Dune.
Right.
Like, he was the right guy to do this version.
Oh, definitely. Now, I wouldn't call this an adaptation personally. Now hear me out. This is a political action sci-fi fantasy with a Dune plot. This is not. I don't think of this as a Dune movie. It is a film with Dune in it, which I feel is better. Because if it's a direct adaptation of a book, then you have to have inner monologues and you have to have all the sit down like discussions and all the exposition. But when you make a movie with a plot based on Dune, not an adaptation of it, but based on it, then you are more likely to have a cohesive story, even if it doesn't 100% match the book. Does that make any sense? You're muted.
Thank you.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
that definitely makes sense. I should clarify something. When I say the word adaptation, I am intentionally using the word adaptation, not translation.
Right.
I'm intentionally giving the idea of adapting to a new medium in the same sense as an animal adapting to a new environment or a human adapting to a new school. In my eyes, A the fundamental core of adaptation, what makes it adaptation, is that you changed things and that you took things out and that you added things to make it fit with the new medium. So is it a Dune movie? Is it an adaptation of Dune? Is it a movie that happens to have the same plot as Dune? I don't really know because I haven't read Dune. But at the same
Right.
time, I think that like this particular version, they nailed it.
Right. Yeah, I consider it a movie in the Dune universe. Because, like, it's not an adaptation of the book. The book is a universe, and this movie is just that universe, but through a different lens. Because again, books they're mediums that you can have inner monologues, you can have sit down conversations, you can have entire chapters dedicated to something completely different than the main story, and no one blinks an eye. But when you do that in a movie, you really can't. Which is why I'm a big fan of TV based book adaptations, because you can do chapter by chapter. Every episode is another chapter. Whereas in a movie, you can't do that because a TV show can be 23 hours long. A movie can only be, well, now 4 or 6 or however long like movies are nowadays. I'm looking at you, Justice League. No, that movie was good. Like truly, I loved Zack Snyder's version of that movie. Much better than Justice League, at least.
Haven't seen it. Can't
Oh,
comment.
one of these days you do gotta watch it because it is, even if it's not the greatest movie, it is still one of the biggest cultural zeitgeists of our generation, at least. The fans finally getting what they wanted and what they petitioned for from a big studio who wants nothing but money. All right.
Yeah, I
Oh, go ahead.
oh, nothing. I wasn't gonna say. Well, actually, I was going to say something, but it is such a wildly different topic that I don't think that it's appropriate to bring up in this particular episode. That's something to
Gotcha.
discuss in a different podcast,
All right. Well,
or
yeah.
just on TikTok.
Write it down, put it in a note or something, and next time I'm over on that couch and I have you up on uh the podcast, we can maybe talk about that.
Woohoo!
All right. And so I think to close out today, let's talk about our expectations for the sequel. For like what's coming next in this the films, and any theories that we might have just about whatever Dune Part 2 is going to be. And so I will let you go first unless you need time to think, in which case, and I'll go first.
I would rather go first so that my expectations aren't changed by your expectations of the book,
All right.
because I want to give the perspective of the guy who hasn't read the book, because I
Right.
think that's who the target audience is of this movie.
Oh,
Anyway,
definitely.
so having not read the book, I would take a guess that the direction that the next film is going to go in, I can't talk, would be Paul gaining gaining a legitimate actual following among the Fremen through diplomatic means and through violence if necessary, and becoming like the actual leader, them actually looking to him as a leader, them treating him with authority and respect, to the point that he can eventually not avenge his father's death. I would kind of like to see him getting back at the Harkonnen, and
Right.
especially him eventually making a play for the throne of Emperor of the Universe.
Right.
Which is such a cool title. That sounds like something in a space opera. That sounds like That sounds like a He-Man thing.
Exactly. Or just a Star Wars thing, to be honest. All right. And then,
Yep, I could do that.
so without using any of my prior knowledge of the books, which is going to be hard, I definitely,
No, no, please use your prior knowledge of the book. That's kind of the point.
right.
I gave the non-prior knowledge of the book. You give the knowledge of the book.
Okay. So, like, the book is gonna it's gonna end how you expect it to end. Good's gonna prevail. It's just how films go. Like, it's not a drastic change. This thing was written in, like, I think the 70s. So it's an old formula that we're seeing, like, done again, or technically done again, because it's an adaptation. But we're gonna see the end result that we expect to see. But what I feel we're gonna see differently in this, of course, we're gonna see other like high profile actors because now you have an entire army of Fremen to cast, so you can get your big name actors. Like you can have cameos from like George Lucas or Robert Downey Jr. or Tom Holland just in and amongst the Fremen ranks. I expect to see that. Like that's not something I don't expect to see, and it's something I expect new rock stars to like break down frame by frame and just find all the little Easter egg people they have hidden around in the crowd. Um, but then we're also going to see, I think, like the Fremen being trained to fight, to become one of the most formidable fighting forces the galaxy's ever seen because they're being trained by House Atreides, which is one of the most formidable fighting forces the galaxy has ever seen. Now, I don't know if they're gonna do the God Emperor arc yet. I think that was the title of the book, was God Emperor, because the arc where Paul becomes Emperor of the Universe is a completely separate book. So I don't think we're gonna see that yet. I hope we get we get to see it because that introduces Paul's son and the and what could come with like the baggage that comes with Paul having a son who is also just as strong, if not stronger, within the Bene Gesserit ways of teaching than Paul is, because that raises a lot of questions as to what does it mean to be the Kwisatz Haderach and the Messiah of the Fremen, and who actually has that title. I don't think we're going to see that in this book, because that would in this second film, because that would mean we have to introduce Paul's son and introduce that whole other plot point into this into the story, and we already have Paul's sister coming on the way. That was set up at the end of this film, and that's going to be paid off in the second film because it is a big thing in the books, and I'm not going to spoil. But Paul's sister, little sister, does have a role to play. So, with my knowledge, I hope that we get the adaptation of that book. But if not, if we only get the adaptation of the first Dune, I'm completely fine with that. I don't think it's just going to stop at one book because movie studio need money and Dune make money. But who knows? So with that, unless you have anything further you want to discuss, I think we should end it here. Is there anything we want to talk further about?
I'm good. I guess we'll just have to find out if Dune make money.
All right. Well, let's hope Dune make money, because if Dune make money, we make more video and get more movies to watch. So, with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please go ahead and leave us a like down below. This is going to be a new semi-regular series based on when like popular movies and stuff are released, or we just decide we want to talk about a movie that's already been released. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. We have some really awesome videos. There's a Minecraft series going on this channel. There's a podcast, aside from this one, that goes on this channel every Friday morning. Definitely check that out. And again, I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful day and keep on loving movies.